nonprofit MBA purpose is to provide new business insights and fresh creative ideas for executive directors and their teams that will help them improve their organization. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halasnik. I will be your host for today's Nonprofit MBA podcast. I am, for those of you who don't know me, I am co-founder of Financing Solutions, and we are the leading provider of lines of credit for small nonprofits in the United States. We've been around for 12 years. We're very well known in this space. And if you're interested in getting a line of credit for your nonprofit, it's a very popular product. Please visit us at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. And today we have a sponsor, a Raise. It's spelled A-R-A-I-Z-E. A Raise is a cloud-based accounting system that's built specifically for small to medium-sized nonprofits. I'm a big believer in having specific software for your industry. And if you're using QuickBooks, it's a nightmare for nonprofits. Take a look at a Raise, and I think you'd be pretty impressed. I'm on the board of a small nonprofit, a couple, and we just switched to a Raise. So it's very reasonably priced, and it's perfect. And they're great at the organization. They know nonprofits, so they're really good at answering questions. If you're interested, go to araize.com. It's ARAIZE.com. Or you can give Joe a call at 866-840-7449 and tell him Steve sent you. Today, I'm very excited to be speaking with Amand Lea Kaiser, from Kaiser Insights. Amand Lea Kaiser is a member engagement strategist, professional speaker, and the author of Elevating Engagement: Uncommon Strategies for Creating Thriving Member Communities. Through her research labs and experiments, Amanda is at the forefront of exploring how member and attendees engage in rapidly changing within professional community. Amanda, welcome to today's Nonprofit MBA podcast.
Thanks so much, Steve. I'm delighted to be here.
So let's dive right into today's topic, which is what are the keys to member engagement for nonprofits? And at first, let's talk about what does member engagement really mean?
Yeah, so beyond just transactions. So there's a, if you kind of think of the whole ecosystem of organizations out there, companies, for-profits, everybody from, say, Amazon to your neighborhood dry cleaner, a lot of the kind of connection you have with those companies is very transactional. They do some kind of service for you, or they sell you a product and you give them money. So very, very transactional. And engagement is one step beyond that, or maybe even many steps beyond that. So that gets into this very lovely place for some for-profits and for a lot of nonprofits, where you're looking for a deeper connection, maybe even a relationship. And so that's when you start talking about member engagement and donor engagement and sponsor engagement and attendee engagement. So that's really my focus is all on, not just the transaction, not just on getting people to register or buy or join or donate, but the next step, that relationship part of it, which is engagement.
I don't want to get too technical here, but I'm going to. So before I started my companies, I worked for Xerox for 8.5 years. This was 35 years ago, and Xerox was an amazing organization, really prestigious, really great, well thought out through company. And they had identified phases that people go through in order before they make a decision. And that same methodology is called IDC, Identify, Development, and Commitment. And then inside of those three phases were the steps, depending on what product or service you were selling, that would lead clients through the cycle. Can you apply that same methodology to donor or or member engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm so thrilled you asked that question because I have done over 477 in-depth member interviews, and I've talked to all sorts of people, all kinds of professionals who are members of all kinds of different organizations. And so I've combined all of that research and really looked at what engagement is like from a member's point of view. And there's 6 stages, and I identify that in my new book, Elevating Engagement. So there's, just real quickly, there's the observe stage, the assess stage, participate, contribute, collaborate, and lead. And it takes you from the very moment they press join, or they kind of make that first transactional commitment. They press join, or they register for an event. And that's the observe stage. They're kind of looking at everything that you're doing, and then they assess. And then, slowly over time, at every one of those stages, there's this go or no go decision about whether I want to engage or not. And if they decide to engage, that opens them up for the next step and the next step. And it takes you all the way up to lead, which is where I think we would call mostly that volunteerism. I call it lead in my book because I like to think of volunteerism much bigger than just, say, volunteering for a committee or volunteering for the board. I think we've got to open that up because not everybody's got time to invest hundreds of hours in board work. But yes, very much like you were talking about those stages of purchasing at Xerox. There are 6 stages for member engagement from their point of view.
Yeah, and I think, and by the way, that the IDC, identify, develop, and commitment, and there's actually, I think, recycle too. But the that I use that same model of customer, quote unquote, acquisition through all the different businesses I've had, because I've had multiple businesses. And so what I'm trying to say too is that I think if you really want to dive into the subject matter, right? I think being able to identify the stages that your nonprofit goes through
Mm-hmm.
to move people through the cycles, and knowing what goes inside of each one of identify, develop, and commitment, uh, is a really good way of understanding how your organization works. I mean, it's advanced though, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think so. I think you're really onto something, and I love this, but I think anybody can use it, right? I mean, um, you know, you think about there are nonprofits out there that are manned by volunteers, or one staff person, or 5 staff people, all the way up to hundreds of staff people. And I don't know that this is the purview of just the largest, most sophisticated, most well-moneyed organizations. I think anybody can do it. It's even one person, even a volunteer. And if I were to say, hey, let's focus at a particular place, one of the places that I would focus at is new members. So very, way back at the beginning, in the first couple of stages, you've got, your new members, they just click join. And if you focus on them, then you have a chance of lifelong engagement. So I think there's definitely ways that we can break down the work and focus on the things that matter most. And one of the things that I also did with my research is I looked at feelings of engagement by where you were in the stages. So for all of the members, some of them are brand new members, some of them are 20-year members. Where, how engaged are you? And what I found was there's very much a bell curve. So people who are, brand new, they're in that first year, maybe second year, they tend to be very unengaged. Then you get to the third year through like maybe the 10th or 12th year, very, very engaged. And then as they become long time members, that engagement tails off. So very much like a bell curve. So if you think about the bell curve applying to your organization, you can say, oh yeah, what we see is, hard to get people engaged in the beginning, and then their interest starts to tail off at the end. And maybe that's where we focus. So I don't know that I wouldn't necessarily say, oh, we got to dive in head first and focus on all 6 stages tomorrow, but pick the places where members are most at risk and go there.
Yeah, I was thinking more just the exercise of going through the phases can help an organization, understand. And I think the reason being is, you know, you the question it answers is two. Where do we get our most members from? The most volunteers? What source? Okay. And number two is once we get them interested, how do we keep them engaged? Really, it just kind of answers those two simple questions. So let me ask you this, Amanda. I want you to coach me. I'm a smaller nonprofit. I'm the executive director. I'm listening to this podcast and I'm like, okay, I kind of believe what Amanda and Stephen are talking about, but I'm not sure. Like, how do I get started?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
coach me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about new members in particular, because I think that's a great place to start. If you don't have engaged new members, you're not going to have engaged lifelong members. So let's start at new members. One of the ways that's kind of ubiquitous across all organizations is their one channel, and there's as many as more than 15 channels to reach new members, but the one channel, I'm going to say 99.9% of organizations use is email. And what new members tell me is there's definitely a barrier with email. So what happens is they press join, and then they're delighted to read all of your emails up until about 3 emails. So you've got about 3 emails to convince this person that they want to engage in your organization. And what happens with a lot of organizations is, they press join and they sign up and do all of that. And then there's a system behind, like maybe an association management system or something like that, that starts spitting out emails. Here's your login credentials. Here's your receipt. Here's an invoice. And those are not very engaging. And then there's, then maybe the system spits out some kind of welcome email. And what I like to tell people to do is figure out what the system is spitting out and look at what you've written. It might be, might be a standard email that you wrote, a year or 2 ago. Does that apply anymore? And what can you do to help people feel like they made the right decision in joining? Can you warm up the tone? Can you very quickly get them to something that's of value? Can you write it in such a way that it doesn't take them a lot of time to have, this great experience with your first email? So that's really the number one place is, amazingly enough, that's what association executives tell me is they're dismayed by the number of people who join and then never do another thing. And then members tell me the reason why they never do another thing is because they just can't get past the first couple of emails.
Yeah, I listen. My business sense is also it's really important to measure success, right? So we're all, so many people are focusing on the this top end of this funnel, which is like, let's get some more people interested in joining our organization, and then what comes out on the bottom are more engaged members, or people who are donating money or whatever. But do you really know how many people are coming in and reading that first email, right? How many people are reading the second email? How many people are reading the third email? How many people in all 3 of those phases are then become volunteers or donors and engage? Mm-hmm. If you don't know your numbers, you can't manage it. And so the reason I'm saying that is that I think most people will find that they'll be, if they know the numbers, you'll focus more on converting the people who are already there than going out to find new people. And And so I think we would all rather just focus on what we have instead of going out and finding more of what we don't. So um, then when we're talking about members, I should have asked this earlier. Are we talking about volunteers? Are we talking about people who make donations?
Yeah, so there are some association or some nonprofits like associations, and they have members. They create a member community of like-minded professionals or people in a particular industry that are members. And there's other associate or other nonprofits as well that will have a member base. And so even some charitable nonprofits will have members and donors and volunteers. So I think it depends on the kind of organization, but there are and I think also members, there are members of communities. So some nonprofits might not charge for membership. However, they have a very thriving, active online community, and those folks are all members as well. And the kind of engagement in the stages that I'm talking about applied to online member communities.
So the people that you've spoken to, do you do coaching as well?
I do a lot of keynote speaking. So I do a lot of speaking, a lot of facilitating, a little less coaching right now, but I might get back into that.
I was just wondering if the people who have really used your research well, like, and have actually implemented it and have talked to you about it, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
What? Tell me about that. What is that characteristics of that executive director like?
Oh, that's interesting. A lot of my clients tend to be very, very innovative. And so what tends to happen, it's really funny. I got into business 10 years ago, and I started my business as a qualitative researcher. So I did lots and lots and lots of member interviews. And what I thought I was going to do is I thought I was going to help struggling organizations turn into thriving organizations. What I ended up doing, the kind of people who hired me were a lot of organizations that were at the top of their game, and they just wanted to get better. They were looking out into the future, and they were saying, whatever it is that we're doing now is really great, but it might not carry us 3, 4, 5 years. What is in the future? I get a lot of requests from highly innovative organizations, and they're really, really interesting to work with because they're open to a lot of ideas. So I think what happens, and what I see happen a lot is, and this is not just unique to nonprofits, but this is in the for-profit world. I think that we've been banging the drum on value for so long. We've got to improve our value. We've got to keep up with our changing needs, and make sure that we're providing value in the future. We've got to figure out how to convey or communicate our value proposition. So everybody's very focused on value, but there's two parts of engagement. One is value, and the other half is positive experiences. So value is things like products, services, events, benefits. Positive experiences are things like, warm welcomes and connecting members together and making introductions and thanking people. And, at an event, when you're at the registration table, not just handing people, their badge and, a bag and an agenda, but also, smiling with them and at them and chit-chatting with them, all of those things. So there's got to be value plus experience. And that's what I see with these, top-notch organizations is everybody's been thinking about value, value, value. And now it's time to start adding the experiential part of it so we can get back to real engagement. So I'm super excited about that part.
Well, I'll give you a case study of what you're talking about, and I'll use me in it. Okay. So, I recently got involved with 2 nonprofits, volunteering. One I'm on the board, the other one I'm on the fundraising committee. The one I'm on the fundraising committee is a rather larger nonprofit, or 8 million in revenue, And I raised $12,000 for them, right? I was the largest raiser of money for them, okay? For, for this committee, for their gala, right? And they, by far the largest, okay? And they, when I was at the event, it was an amazing event. First gala I've ever been to. It was amazing how well it was run, right? One of the people who was head of fundraisers, who I wasn't working with, it was his boss, came up to me and said thank you, which I thought was nice, and I kind of expected it. I thought that they should have done that, and I haven't heard peep from them in 7 months.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now of course, the cause to me is near and dear, but I'm like, you know what? I don't know if I want to go through this again next year. The raise, or it's this year, raising the money this year for it. I am really disappointed that they haven't made me feel really good. It doesn't take much. How about just a phone call and say, hey, how come you were so involved? What brought you to raise that money? Thank you so much. Let me tell you about where that money goes and what it's done. Right? It's been weak. It's been really weak. Okay. And, this isn't like somebody who's donated $10, so it goes back to what you're saying. It's a case study of saying, okay, member engagement, donor engagement, the levels and where you are. I mean, maybe I'm a small donor. I don't know. Yes, I mean, from a donation standpoint, there's probably people on the board who are giving, hundreds of thousands of dollars. But again, this wasn't my money. I gave money on top of what I just said. So, and I think as if I was, the tough part of course with executive directors is time, right? You prioritize your time, and you can sit there and say, is it worth me to do what Amanda and Stephen are saying, which is identify the different phases that people are going through and what our response is to them, and, and where we need to make improvements, and are we following it? By the way, the hard part of this is execution, isn't it? It's not just coming up with the idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's a million ideas, right? But the hard part is execution. And I'm so glad that you brought up that example, because that perfectly illustrates what I hear from, in hundreds and hundreds of interviews, that, people want to be recognized, especially when they're, when they're volunteering, when they're doing something outside of their, expected job or something like that. They're spending a lot of time. They can spend a lot of time participating or mentoring or coaching or volunteering, or maybe even helping to set up an event. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of mental energy, and so there is a section in my book on thank yous. The time thing is particularly salient today, because I feel like everybody is saying to me, not only do they have not enough time to do what they need to do, but there's not enough time to do what we want to do. And so I love thinking about all of the things that you could be doing to add that experiential, kind of icing on the cake, while you're already doing what you're doing. So for example, using your example, while you were at the event, it sounded like one person said thank you. It would have been nice if maybe 6 people had said thank you. They're already there. They're already talking with everybody. And so maybe the executive director could have gotten word out to more people, gone into the data, like you were saying, and say, hey, here's all of the people that brought in a lot of money. Let's make sure that, we talked to, these 5 or 10 people, please just go up and say thank you. And so that wouldn't take a lot more time. And honestly, zipping off a 1-minute Loom video, writing even a 2 or 3 line email is better than nothing. Just a super short acknowledgement is better than nothing. There's some interesting services now where you can actually handwrite like a thank you card.
Yep.
And the service will send it, for
Yep.
you. You don't even have to go buy the card or get out your pen or anything like that. So I think there's a ton of ways to just automate that stuff and try to just do it in the course of what you're already doing.
Here, I'm going to tell everybody here something radical. Everybody has plenty of time. Everybody has plenty of time. It's a matter of what you're doing with that time, right? It's a priority, right? You talk about this like with some of my friends. We get annoyed sometimes that some of our friends don't make an effort, and we say, well, they just don't care about us. And it's not really that. It just they haven't prioritized us as higher than something else on their list. So, I mean, the reason why I like going into the phases and designing, seeing what all the different phases are, is because then you say, okay, this is where we're going to spend our time once you've identified where you think the biggest issue is. And you don't need to go through all the phases to know that if you walk away from this podcast and say what is our process for thanking people? Are we following it? How do we know that we're following it? How do we measure it? What is the levels of thanking somebody? Because I can tell you what, you would not have to work on the front end of the funnel of getting people into the queue. Because if you're thanking all those people that did all these things for you in an appropriate way and a consistent way, they are going to tell other people, right? It's reference selling in essence, right? And you'll feel good about your organization. Isn't it great to call somebody up and thank them for what they've done instead of calling someone up and saying, hey, can you donate more time or money? That's a lot more fun going back to the people and telling them and learning about their lives and learning, Good Grief has no idea why. That's the name of the organization, Good Grief. They have no idea why I were able to get $12,000 raised and how I did it. They just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So people want to tell their stories, right?
Yeah. Word of mouth is so powerful. And I think that is the thing that works for most nonprofits. Unless, again, you're big budgets, very well moneyed. Most of what you're doing and most of the energy and excitement, the participation is coming through word of mouth. So when you're not engaging people, when they've said, hey, I will, I want to be a part of this and I want to give my money or I want to give my time or I want to give my ideas, and then things don't go well and they don't engage, then not only might they not tell others how great you are, but they might actually be word of mouth detractors. And I see this a lot too. I'll see in the professional association arena, I hear about members who did not have a great experience, maybe as a younger new professional, and then they're promoted. So they're promoted to the point where they're running maybe a small team and then a large team, and maybe they've got 40 people under them. And when somebody says, hey, I want to be a member of our professional association, that manager, that director is not going to be real thrilled about it. They're not necessarily going to say, sure, let's spend the company's money on dues, and yes, you can have some time off to work in that association. And so it can become very damaging when people don't engage, because not only are they not doing the word of mouth, they might be detracting as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have a little bit of time left, just a couple of minutes. Where would you want to leave it off with our listeners on this subject?
Yeah, I think that if you're feeling like, or your metrics are showing you that engagement is not as high as you want it to be in some place, maybe with your new members, maybe with your longtime members, I feel like most organizations can pinpoint their weak spot. Then go back to the formula of engagement, which is value plus positive experiences equal engagement. You may find that your value proposition is actually fine. What I hear organization executive directors talk about a lot is we have all of this stuff, but people don't use it. It seems like we're unable to market or unable to communicate. And it might not be that. It might just be the experiential part of things. It might be that they can't hear your value proposition because they don't feel like they belong. They don't feel like they're part of the community, or they haven't been warmly welcomed enough. So there's so many experiential ways to get people's attention. There's a lot of facilitators right now saying, make sure you do like connection before content. And I like that statement. So, think about whether it's volunteers or donors or members or attendees, they're kind of signing in for the very first time. Figure out that connection part before you start delivering them content or value.
Yeah, I'm going to put my 2 cents into this too. And I would say this is, I think the first thing I would do is read your book, which is, elevating engagement, uncommon strategies for creating thriving member communities. I always find that when I read a book, it focuses my attention in that subject. And then after you read the book, and then, let's pull things out of it that you want to do. And then the second thing I would say is the unglamorous part of running a nonprofit is exceptional execution of your strategy. So, try not doing everything. Just do one or two things really, really, really good. And I think what we're talking about here is making sure that you have an incredible, well executed, well thought through thank you. And I'm not saying this because I got slighted, so to speak. It's got nothing to do with this. As an example, I'm a big boy. I can handle that. I'm saying because I think from a quote unquote nonprofit business strategy standpoint, if I was a nonprofit, and I would say that's the number one most important thing I would be focusing in on is, what is our process? How do we do it? And do we do it well? And how do we consistently do it well? Thanking the people who are helping our organization. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's also something to public thank yous as well. So there's a time and place for a private thank you, and probably that organization should have reached out to you privately. But it also is nice to get recognized from the podium, and it's nice for you, but it's not just nice for you. Everybody else in the audience sees those public moments of recognition, and they feel like, so if I were to do what Steve does, I would get some public recognition too. And that always feels well. It feels really good. People like knowing that what they're doing was, helpful and of value, that their contribution is being valued. And so, I think if when you're talking about the thank you part of it, that very nice mix of private recognition, public thank yous go a really long way, not just, again, for that person who's worked so hard, but for your whole community.
Yeah, you might even used to be nice to say, even if you had all right, maybe if you had a volunteer who was able to give you some time, you could ask them to be the director of thank yous, or think up with a better title than that, and ask them to be the person who is always on top of that. That'd be a fun job, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it'd be
Yeah.
like the chief gratitude officer.
Yeah.
Sign me
Oh, I
up for
like
that one.
that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
you have to find the right person who does that. Someone who's going to stay. It's going to be. They're probably going to love that work. And that'd go a long way of making a big difference. And then also tell them too is this is what my recommendation. Tell them that you want to build a system of gratitude, so that if they're not there, if they're no longer with our organization, that our gratitude program still works, because that person's going to be gone one day, and then you don't want your gratitude system to go out the door.
Yeah.
So, right.
Yeah.
Good. Amanda, any other last keywords? I know I gave you one last keyword before, but is there anything else that you'd like to say?
No, this has been really wonderful, Stephen. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Yeah, it was very good. I enjoyed it myself. So I'd like to thank so very much Amanda Lea Kaiser from Kaiser Insights for coming on to today's podcast. And if you like today's podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend and also subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. And if you like today's podcast, please give us a 5-star review on your podcasting app. It really helps us get the word out. It makes a big difference in the algorithms. The Nonprofit MBA podcast is in the top 5% of all podcasts out there. And we, want to get into that 1%. I love our guests. We've done over 400 episodes. And if you just listen to the guests on all my podcasts, you are going to kick butt as far as doing a great job running your organization. If you're interested in a line of credit for your nonprofit, you can visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com or give us a call at 862-207-4118. And Amanda, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can search for Amanda Lea Kaiser, and my middle name is spelled weird. It's spelled Lea. So Amanda Lea Kaiser, like the roll, Kaiser. .com is my website. So amandaleakaiser.com. And you can also search for Elevating Engagement on Amazon. It just published a few weeks ago. So it's right there on Amazon as well.
Great. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
So I always end the podcast this way. I want to thank our listeners for all the hard work that they do trying to make the world a better place. I know that Amanda and I are doing our own thing in our own way, but you guys are out there always making a difference on a day-to-day basis. I thank you for that. However, I just want to remind you that you're no good to your family, no good to employees, you're no good to your cause, you're no good to anybody if you don't take good care of yourself first. So make sure that you're exercising any way you do it, and you're eating right and you're taking good care of yourself, because we need people there for the long term, because we have our problems in this world and we need those generals like you guys out there trying to make the place better. And I thank you for that. Other than that, I just want to thank you all for being great listeners, and I wish you the best.